The floodwaters that swept through western Queensland in March 2025 didn't just drown livestock. They wiped out more than 200,000 head of cattle, sheep and goats, destroyed thousands of kilometers of fencing, and triggered a cattle supply shock that pushed saleyard prices to their highest level in months. For the producers at the center of it, a full year's income was lost in days. For shoppers at the checkout, it added pressure to meat prices that were already elevated. For outback towns that depend on grazing, it set off a recovery bill now measured in the hundreds of millions of dollars. This is the story of the Western Queensland Surface Trough event of 2025 and the economic damage it left behind. The official event ran from March 21st to May 19th, 2025. At its peak, between March 27th and April 2nd, floodwaters covered an area somewhere between 500,000 and 700,000 square kilometers. Premier David Crisafulli described it as more than too victorious. The Queensland Department of Primary Industries put the impacted area closer to 700,000 square kilometers, almost the size of New South Wales. The rainfall numbers explain why. According to the Bureau of Meteorology, Queensland's March 2025 area average rainfall was 207.2 millimeters, 124% above the long-term average. It was the third wettest March on record for the state since 1900. Some towns received up to 500 millimeters in a single week, a typical annual total for the region. Trinidad Station, between Windora and Adavale, recorded 612 millimeters in just 9 days, nearly double its annual average. At Balumber, between Quilpie and Eromanga, 340 millimeters fell in a single day, more than the entire 2010 flood event. Stonehenge, Junda, and Windora all surpassed the 1974 flood heights, the previous benchmark for outback flooding in living memory. Warnings did come, but they came late for many on the ground. Sheep producer Brendan Murray from Eromanga told Sheep Central that by the time the Bureau of Meteorology began forecasting the rain, he had already had 50 to 75 millimeters and was trying to move sheep. Quilpie Shire Mayor Ben Hall and Shire CEO Justin Hancock publicly pointed to an infrastructure gap. There is no weather radar between Alice Springs and Charleville, which meant forecasters had limited data on what was coming. That gap translated directly into lost time and lost stock. The first official livestock count came on April 1st. Primary Industries Minister Tony Purritt said 82 disaster impact surveys had been returned, putting initial losses at 105,348 head. The next day, Department of Primary Industries Director General Graham Bolton told a parliamentary inquiry the figure had climbed to around 144,000, made up of roughly 69,000 cattle, 69,000 sheep, and 7,800 goats and other livestock. International reporting, citing The Guardian, soon put the preliminary breakdown at 150,000 head, broken down as 70,000 cattle, 70,000 sheep, and 10,000 goats and horses. The figure did not stop there. By May 9, 2025, with 183 disaster impact surveys returned, the Department of Primary Industries reported 207,510 head impacted. That included 102,506 missing and 105,004 deceased. In roughly 5 weeks, the confirmed toll had almost doubled. Minister Purritt said the preliminary numbers were shocking and would continue to climb as floodwaters receded. AgForce Queensland General President Shane McCarthy said he had seen stock losses of up to 80% in some areas. His warning was blunt. It takes years to build back numbers, he said, and that is before you count the genetic work behind a breeding herd. For individual producers, the numbers are stark. Brendan Murray was running 9,000 sheep before the flood. He estimated he had lost up to 6,000 head. He told reporters he didn't think there was any hope for the rest. Stephen Tully at Bungendary Station west of Quilpie had 10,000 goats, 8,000 sheep, and 300 cattle before the rain began. He recorded 325 millimeters in 40 hours, his annual rainfall in under 2 days. Louise and Dan Hawk, who run goats and cattle near Quilpie, lost about half the animals on their 24,281 hectare Maybe Downs property. The second layer of damage was infrastructure. Early estimates put fencing losses at around 3,183 kilometers, climbing to roughly 3,500 kilometers by April 2nd. Private roads damaged were estimated at over 4,000 kilometers, later revised to more than 4,700 kilometers. On the Hawk family's home block alone, 40 kilometers of fencing was destroyed. Their out-of-pocket repair costs for materials, reported by Queensland Country Life in July 2025, had already reached 180,000 Australian dollars, with more work to come. This is where the chain of economic consequences begins. Fewer cattle and sheep means fewer animals being moved to market. In the first week of April 2025, the benchmark Eastern Young Cattle Indicator, a rolling average of saleyard prices, closed at 703.16 cents per kilogram carcass weight. That was the first time it had gone above 700 cents since January, according to Beef Central. The reason was supply. The number of cattle feeding into the indicator dropped by 6,000 head on the previous week and 11,000 head on the week before that. Major sales at Roma, Australia's biggest selling centre, along with Gracemere, Blackall and Charters Towers, were cancelled. The effect moved south. At Wagga in New South Wales, young cattle prices rose between 30 and 50 cents per kilogram as buyers looked to fill feedlot and restocker orders that would normally have come out of Queensland. For producers in unaffected regions, that was an income lift. For processors and for households buying meat, it was added cost in the system at a time when beef was already benefiting from constrained supply in the United States and Brazil. The wool side was hit differently, but just as hard. Most sheep in the Quilpie, Eromanga, and surrounding districts were in full wool when the floods hit. Shearing was scheduled to start within weeks. Fleeces were soaked, stained, and lost condition. Brendan Murray told Sheep Central that apart from the stock losses, a full year's income in wool would also be lost because of the damage to fleeces. Quilpie Shire Mayor Ben Hall confirmed in May 2025 that producers were about a third of the way through shearing. The wool, he said, was washed out and had lost a lot of condition. The sheep that survived were still being shorn, but the return on that wool would be sharply reduced. That is a direct hit to farm gate income in a region where wool sales are a major source of annual cash flow. The broader regional economics matter here. Queensland's agricultural sector was forecast to be worth 23.56 billion Australian dollars in 2024 to 25, according to Queensland government figures cited by JBA Risk. The 10 local government areas most affected by these floods contribute around 5% of that, or roughly $881.5 million. Minister Purritt said the disaster-declared region's cattle, sheep, and goat activity contributed almost $800 million to the state in the previous financial year. That is the income base that took the hit. The response from government has been substantial, but it is recovery spending, not replacement for lost production. A 160 million Australian dollars joint Commonwealth state package was announced on April 11, 2025. That included a $105 million exclusion fence restitution program, offering grants of up to $500,000 per producer to rebuild damaged fencing. Disaster recovery grants of up to $75,000 for primary producers were made available. The emergency fodder support package was lifted from $5 million to $12 million. Concessional disaster loans were raised from $250,000 to $5 million in recognition of the scale of livestock losses. In July 2025, a further $45.75 million was added, including a $25.6 million primary producer support package targeting wild dog barrier fencing and financial counseling. A $14.61 million community health and well-being package and a $4.77 million mental health recovery package were also activated. The industry response was immediate. The Queensland Fire Service used helicopters to drop hay bales to stranded livestock. Between 20 and 30 helicopters came in from as far as Alice Springs and Cloncurry to Quilpie to help with rescues and fodder drops. Shane and Lauren Wendelborn of Channel Country Helicopters were credited by producers on the ground. Blaze Aid, the volunteer fencing charity, was on the Hawk properties from April onward, working alongside owners to fill in washouts and rebuild boundary fences. Late in 2025, a first for Australia policy change was announced. Embryo transfer procedures were added to the list of eligible reimbursements under disaster recovery funding arrangements, applied retrospectively to disaster events from January 29, 2025. For producers who lost breeding herds, the policy change recognized that rebuilding genetics, not just headcount, is central to getting stations back to full production. The ground-level reality is that recovery is slow. Erosion has made fence rebuilds difficult. Large washouts had to be filled before fence lines could be reestablished. The Hawk family bought a side-by-side vehicle just to access damaged fences in wet ground. Louise Hawk told Queensland Country Life it was time-consuming because of how much had been washed out. There is one upside, and producers have named it. The same water that killed livestock also left behind strong winter feed. Jenny Gordon of El Cantara near Longreach recorded 740 millimeters in 2025 against just 250 millimeters in 2024. Dan Hawk described the winter feed as the best he had ever seen. For producers who survive with enough stock to restock, that feed base will underpin recovery. For those who lost 80 or 100%, the feed is there, but the animals to eat it are not. Where things stand now is this. The confirmed official toll of livestock impacted is 207,510 head. Thousands of kilometers of fencing are still being rebuilt. The wool clip from a 2025 season came off damaged and will deliver reduced returns. The government recovery spend is past $190 million and applications for grants remain open until April 2, 2026. Cattle prices nationally are holding at elevated levels, supported by constrained supply from the north and global demand. Meat and Livestock Australia's September 2025 projections had the national cattle herd easing slightly to around 31 million head as of June 30, 2025. ABARES has since forecast the saleyard indicator price for 2026 to 27 at 705 cents per kilogram carcass weight, down 9% year-on-year, as prices normalize. What the flood did was accelerate supply tightness in the north, while adding rebuild costs that producers will carry for years. Minister Purritt said the government was here for the long haul, and that Channel Country graziers know it will take many years in some cases to rebuild what they lost. That assessment is the clearest summary of the economic reality. The headline figure of more than 150,000 livestock dead captured the shock. The final tally of over 207,000 captured the scale. The rebuild cost, the lost wool income, the elevated cattle prices, and the grants still being processed capture what it actually means for the people carrying it. The floodwaters have receded. The bill has not. Subscribe.